um, because I think that in a sense, I think because of punk rock, ultimately, I thought of music as something that you could do without being a musician, you know.
Mm.
So, so I think that that's what fueled me for a long time. And like when I got the call from my friend Carla, who's also a musician, is still Carla Boswich.
Oh yeah.
Um, you know Carla?
Yeah, only from her, she had some great quotes about early James, and so in that oral history, and that
Oh, right.
led me to her music.
Yeah, yeah. Geraldine Fivers and stuff. She had a moment.
Mhm.
We've sort of reconnected recently, which is nice. But but you know, when I got the call from her to uh, to ask if I was interested in meeting Perry, if I knew his old band and stuff, that call that started Perry and I coming together and started the very genesis of James. Um, at that point, I was thinking I was going to sell my rig. Like I just had a little bass amp and, you know, and I was doing nothing. I was working, you know, bussing tables, and you know, I just thought, oh, maybe this music thing is now done, you know. And I think that because of that, a lot of those points in life, I think, have come to be where you're sort of, if you're open to something dying, then you're open to something new happening, you know. And I think of my friend Chris, who was the first guitar player in James, who was the guy who was like way more gifted than I was in every way. Like he was just one of those people who was like really handsome. He was really like a physical specimen. He was a great guitar player, painter, writer of poetry, and like just he did everything. And he wound up doing nothing and then dying of a heroin overdose, age 29. And I always thought that like he couldn't commit to anything because he had all these possibilities. Everything was sort of going in a certain direction, and it seemed to him like he was gonna just move forward to the next thing, whatever that was. And that wound up being a siren's call, you know, onto rocks that never even presented. You know, like he just kept going forward because he felt he could, and there was always something better. Like, you know, he didn't stay with James because he was like, I really want to make like rock music, like Smashing Pumpkins. And or no, sorry, he was like, I really want to make art music like Savage Republic.
Oh,
So I was like, okay, well, you know, well, we could sort of incorporate that here. No, no, he's on to it. He's on it, on his way. So then we replace him, make Janes, and that goes the way that it goes. Then years later, I ran into him again, tried to recruit him into Polar Bear. And at that time, he's then going, no, thanks. I want to make Smashing Pumpkins music, like rock. And I was like, you didn't want to do that when we were doing it years ago. Now you want to do that, you know. But anyway, he just, I could never get him. And conversely, I was always thinking, oh, this is it. Like, so when I get that call from Carla and she says, you know, do you know this band? And she says, what do you think? And I said, I think they blow. You know, I then said, well, why do you ask? And she said, oh, because they're looking for a bass player. Never mind. And I said, oh, you know, but that pricked up my ears because I was like, I was ready to step off. Like, oh, maybe having a bass amp and a bass is silly and I should sell it for rent. You know, so I was at that place thinking, well, what do I have to lose? And instead, maybe I might meet some cool people. And I knew that Perry was sort of plugged into the LA Weekly, which was like the sort of the fulcrum of the kind of LA cultural scene. It was a free rag, you know. And so because I was at that place where I was, thinking this was done for me, I was open to something like that, that I think if I was like, no, I'm on my road to being a musician and I'm going to be a thing, like I would have gone, oh yeah, no, I don't like that band, so I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm going to be a musician. And instead, it made me open to doing something that wound up, changing my life, So, yeah. I forget where I started with all this, but
No, I think there's the parallel at the end of James. You were thinking maybe this is the end of my life in music, maybe,
right.
and that you had already experienced that before you formed James, before Carla hooked you up with Perry. It sounds like you were in a similar place. So
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's where I started. So then if you imagine, I just kept, some part of me anyway, kept thinking that in that, you sprinkle in some young man's hubris as well. I'm eventually gonna, get a Nobel Prize for directing films, or whatever. You think that you're just doing that. But I kept thinking that the music thing was just extending itself temporarily, like the James thing. Just took that person who was not going to be a musician anymore and extended it a little further forward. And so I never felt like a musician in the sense that I didn't, I don't even think it's something that I do especially well compared to other things. Like a friend of the family once pointed out, he was like an old sort of kind of old school gay art patron. He had some wealth from somewhere or whatever, one of those types. But I remember him making the observation that a lot of the artists that he had come to know abandoned their first gift. And it came out of the conversation with me because at the time I was doing James, but I was saying how really visual art had been my first thing, and I do have a knack, I can sketch, and that is sort of my first, that was my raison d'etre when I went to, restaurants. I always wanted to go to the restaurants that had paper placemats so that I, they could flip it and my father would give me a pen and I'd be taken care of. And,
that's great.
Yeah. So, but then
yourself.
I sort of stopped doing that, I have a sketch that I saved that I did of a mouse. That's really, really good, actually. Like I had it framed and I put a date on it. So, but that's probably the last time I did a serious kind of visual art kind of thing. Like,
and that was when you were very young, still on a placemat, like that age?
No, this would have been after that, but still in teens, probably maybe 19, maybe 18, 19, something like that. But then I sort of abandoned that and got into doing the music stuff. And but yeah, I say it in this context because it's funny. I just had the thought, like, I really wish I could produce the sketch because I feel like I was being sort of self-aggrandizing, but I really, it's just a sort of photographic representation of a mouse,
like a realistic.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not saying,
but also, how many people that will sketch something and it just doesn't look like the thing they're trying to draw, or it looks totally surreal? I mean, it's very hard to draw.
Right.
So, I mean, I just listening to your bass playing, I imagine, the creativity doesn't just, it extends to other parts of a person's life. So I'm not surprised to hear that you used to draw and that you used to draw well. It doesn't sound self-aggrandizing. It just sounds like I would expect, you to have other interests and other abilities. But you're gonna have to pull out that. You're gonna have to find that mouse now, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I wasn't, because I used to have it on my piano, and if I wasn't in between houses, it would be at the ready, but it's somewhere buried in a box right now. So, but yeah, so I always sort of thought that the music thing was a temporary thing that would eventually, the wheels would come off and then I would move on to whatever next I was going to do. But I don't think I ever, in that young man sort of hubris kind of way, I don't think I ever really thought about the practical reality of that, like what that would actually look like,
Mhm.
And it wasn't until years later that I saw the sort of harsh reality of, like, okay, what's on offer for the, failed out of high school guy is, painting houses and, construction work or something,
Yeah.
and I remember at the time going, I'm gonna paint houses because I'm not gonna sell out, and so that idea needed some adjusting,
Yeah. Then you paint a few houses and you just think this is brutal, even when it's 80 degrees out. It's brutal.
Yeah. So, when there's a phrase that the band Garbage uses all the time, it beats slop and hot tar, and like, and I really do feel like I do have that, like, as long as I frame it in my human experience, then anything I do for music work is fucking easy, like
it beats slop and tar.
Yeah.
Or it beats picking cotton, and that my dad grew up in the country. It beats picking cotton.
Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah, not